AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Rameez Tase. Rameez is the co-founder and CEO of Antenna. Rameez, welcome to the show.
Hey, JP, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So, Rameez, normally what we would do at the start is I would ask for you to give a brief background of yourself and walk us through your journey before talking about Antenna. But given your personal journey and background is so intertwined with the idea behind Antenna and the company, why don't you just take it from the top, explain who Antenna are as a business, and then walk us back through the journey behind it all.
At large, Antenna is building measurement and analytics solutions for consumer entertainment businesses, and specifically for that new layer of consumer entertainment that's really focused on subscriptions. And so we can help at a market level, for example, help you understand whether your churn rate or your trial conversion rate is better or worse than your competitors, and what you might do to change that. So that's really what Antenna does. But now let me back up and kind of talk a little bit about how we got there. I started my career in financial services and investment banking and private equity, and I pretty quickly transitioned into the startup world. I think like we all do early in our career, we really start to understand exactly who we want to be and what we want to grow up and do once we start working, and I was no different. So pretty quickly after a couple of years in finance, made this transition into media and technology. And I was working at a digital media startup called Mike at the time, right after finance. And look, I was an outsider. I didn't really have any point of view on how things are done in media. I came from finance. And so I started to look at everything from first principles. And one thing that really, really struck me was everyone in media was still operating based on the concept that scale equals success. The number of page views, clicks, eyeballs that you can get, the bigger that number becomes, the more successful you are. But here's what changed in the market and rendered that the wrong way of thinking, frankly. Paid ads, it became actually very easy and cheap to basically reach everyone on the globe quickly. And so everyone could do it. And when something is easy to do, it's not very valuable to do. So instead, the entire kind of paradigm in consumer media and retail had flipped, where it wasn't just about building a huge audience. It was about building an audience that was highly engaged, that loved your brand, that really contributed their wallets to your product. And so all of these subscription and purchase metrics started to become more important than just getting a bunch of page views on your site. And this is something that I think, because of my outsider status, I kind of recognized a little bit earlier than the industry. And so I started way before Antenna, 7 years before Antenna maybe, really trying to weave these metrics into how we hired, how we compensated, how we built our business. And I had a little bit more success at my kind of next stop on the journey, which was at Axios, another digital media, digital news company that I would say has really, really embraced this concept of engagement and loyalty and customer lifetime value over scale. And it permeates through really every decision they make, and to their success and their credit. But of course, within one of those companies, you can only help one company at a time. And the goal with Antenna is to help hundreds of companies think through this and therefore build sustainable business models. These are products that I use nearly every waking minute of my life. And so I'm deeply invested in helping them get to that successful point so that they can be lasting brands to come.
Thank you for that, Rameez. It's always great to hear the idea behind an entrepreneur's business, where they identified the gap in the market and why they decided to build a business to solve a problem or provide a solution that is needed and growing in need, which is certainly what you're doing at Antenna. So can you now give us some insight into, from day one when you launched to where you're at now, some of the main wins that you and your team have achieved, and what it's like day to day to be part of the data team at Antenna?
We launched publicly to the market a little bit over a year ago, and we were working on this in 2019, my co-founder and I. And since then, it's been very, very incredible, and we're very fortunate that the business that we built, focused on consumer subscription and entertainment services, has been largely buoyed given everything that's happened over the last year. So really, the way I'd characterize that is we thought that this was going to be a 3, 4, 5-year journey to get to where we are right now. It turned out to be less than 18 months because of those macro tailwinds, which has been incredible. We grew the team from basically 0 to about 20 people in that time. We grew ARR by several $1 million in that time. We launched our first product, our MVP, and built some real rigor and improved that number of times. We received our first kind of dozen or a couple dozen customers. And so it's been a really, really exciting time, and I hope we're near done with that excitement.
Can you help us understand what some of the biggest challenges were early on in getting in front of customers, explaining the use case benefits, and then walking through the customer journey to the impact it's now having for your customers in terms of revenue saved, increased profitability, all of the great things that Antenna are able to do in terms of impact?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I would say the challenges that we faced were somewhat similar to any early stage startup, that cold start problem, right? How do you go from 0 to 1? And so there's a lot of specific things that Antenna dealt with within that more general framework. For example, many analytics startups, they're built based on, hey, customer, if you share a little bit of your data with us, we'll give you a little bit of this other valuable data. Well, in a world that's dominated by Apple, Netflix, Amazon, others who are very well known for guarding their data extremely well, we knew that wasn't going to work. So we had to find a wedge into solving this problem, and we largely relied on partnerships with purely opt-in third-party data sources, which has been really, really great to date. In terms of the sales cycle, the commercial bit, what's really, really worked for us is very, very authentically writing about the market using our data as a lens and putting it out there on social media, putting it out there on our blog, partnering with journalists and analysts to have it out there. I think one thing that a lot of folks get wrong in the marketing world is content marketing is kind of treated as if it's a little bit like spam or it's a little bit inauthentic. And we really lean heavily on oversharing and sharing very valuable real insight from our data. And look, the market noticed. So that's been our biggest lead gen lever. So starting that up and getting that going was really helpful in the early days for our commercial efforts. One thing that's been challenging there has been really educating the market, because this is so new, right? We're not in the part of the market where we're ravenously competing with folks that are all doing the same thing. We're in the very early stages of the market where we have to educate customers and define exactly how they're going to use this. And remember, in the media or the streaming vertical specifically, many of these folks have been using Nielsen data or box office data, and it's really up to us to help them understand, here's how the market's changing, and here's why this data is now equally, if not more valuable than those other sources that you've been using for a while.
And looking at the customer journey, once you get to that point where you're educating them and you're explaining the impact, what are some of the short-term wins that a customer would see once they start to work with Antenna and just help us understand the early impact that this can have?
Of course. So one key arena in which the data is very valuable is when you're making a pricing, a promotion, a distribution decision as a consumer service. So for example, you might pick your favorite streamer, Disney Plus, HBO Max, whoever it might be. These are all fairly new services, and they're thinking about the right pricing strategy, right? If we launch a 6-month or a 12-month plan, if we get rid of our free trial, what's the likely impact that that's going to have on our bottom line, both now and in the future? Well, your first-party data doesn't go very far because you haven't done a price increase, or you haven't actually done the thing that you're trying to analyze. And A/B testing isn't really the right framework, because once you reduce or increase prices to millions of consumers, you can't really just roll that back and say, hey, that was a mistake, without tremendous brand impact. And so relying on these kind of case studies essentially that come out of the third-party market data has been extremely valuable as people are trying to make those pricing, distribution, promotion decisions in really high stakes environments.
Yeah, and it's great to hear about it because a lot of what you're doing is the first of its kind and helping these big brands sort of predict better, more informed decisions based on market data. Switching focus now to the data behind it all, the technology behind it all, and the data team. Can you give us some insight into what goes on behind the scenes, the how in which you do it, and to be a member of the data team, whether it's a machine learning, data science, data engineering, what the journey has been like?
Yeah, it's funny that you say the data team. I almost think of every team like the data team at this specific company because our product really is the data and the analytics. We have data engineers, we have data scientists, we have data analysts, and of course our commercial team is very well versed in explaining and analyzing the data as well. So just stepping back from that, talking about the data engineering and data science and maybe analytics teams specifically, the way we're doing this is we're partnering with a number of third-party data sources, and we're getting things like millions and millions of users' transaction histories or whatever it might be. And of course, this is done completely on an opt-in basis. Users know exactly how their data is being used. And so we have this kind of messy set of records. And from that, we go in, we add logic, we add sophistication and metadata. We combine and contrast a number of different data sources. And what you get at the end of the day is these metrics: signups, trial conversions, different plan types, different price points, how loyal users were. When people cancel, do they then switch to another competing service immediately? All of these data points that our customers really want. That's what comes out of that giant pipeline. And so it's a very integrated process where data engineering, data science, and data analytics work hand in hand together to kind of solve a problem specifically for this kind of customer vertical or market segment. And I think that's really, really important too, by the way, JP. And what's unique to us, we really come at this from what is the fundamental customer or user problem, and how do we solve that using data? I think that stands in stark contrast to folks that say, hey, we have a lot of data, what do we do with it? And I don't find that latter approach particularly compelling. Antenna is certainly more driven entirely by what the customer actually wants and is struggling with.
Which, on that second point, you're always going to have a value add if you take that approach. So you talked in your intro about the rapid growth over the past 12 months. The question, and this is something that many entrepreneurs will be thinking about, how do you manage to grow at such scale while maintaining the level of service and overall quality of work? What have you learned by doing that?
I think it actually starts with our core values and the early team who really strongly resembles these core values to a T. I know a lot of people probably say this, but I do not think there's an early team. There's a first 10 employee type team who's more impressive than our team, both in terms of the achievements and the work and in terms of the integrity that they bring. So we've been very fortunate there, because then when you have that, it scales itself, because every person you hire within those teams and when those people interview, they are diverse, but very homogenous on those kind of core cultural values. So we think about a number of values. 3 of them that come to mind right now are we always overpromise and overdeliver. And the reason is there aren't many startups that last more than a couple of years who underpromise and overdeliver, because your product is not really mature enough to underpromise. And there are certainly no startups that exist after a couple of years that underdeliver. So we think about overpromising and overdelivering, and we hear it time and time again in our customers. Hey, we know that this is a premium priced product, but we feel like our roadmaps are really converging. We feel like you, Antenna, really get our problem, and we love working with you. It's something I've heard a dozen times already in our short existence. The second core value that comes to mind is respectful candor. We as a group are extremely tight and aligned, and we have no problem giving feedback to each other to improve one another, but we don't do it in a way that ad hominem attacks people. We don't develop personal animosity. I think there's way too much of that in the world right now, but I see this as a place where everyone here is going to just supercharge their career, and in return, their work is going to help supercharge the company's growth. And then the last value that comes to mind is integrity. I mentioned that just a minute ago. At the end of the day, market measurement and analytics startups are a religion. The entire value of the product is, hey, we can't find this information about the market or about our competitor. Therefore, we will trust that you can, and we'll partner with you. And so they can't prove or disprove the data directly. In that instance, all we have is our word. All we have is our integrity, the methodology, the way we're communicating results, and the things we do when we're not sure. That's all we have to live by. And the second that you slip up even once, it's a house of cards. So I think those three values are really important in defining both who we have been and who we will be.
And those are certainly backed up with the number of customers that you've brought on, some of which are the biggest names in this industry, but then also speaking to your colleagues, all of whom are fully engaged and love what they do. And that's a testament to living by those values, absolutely. So focusing now on what's next, it's obviously been an incredible journey thus far. You guys have, fair to say, overperformed your own expectations, but you're only just getting started. So could you give us some insight into what you see as the size of the opportunity in this emerging space?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to have had such a great year, but still be closer to 1% than 100% simultaneously. Very unique thing about kind of rapidly scaling startups. In terms of the opportunity, I kind of mentioned, we see this as the entire consumer entertainment or consumer subscription economy, and that's gaming, it's streaming, it's fitness, wellness, education. There's so many different little niches within that world, and they all need to think about these metrics and how they fit in to this larger market. I think that's a pretty big opportunity. I've been like roughly saying it's over $100 million in ARR. And, of course, we're just at kind of a couple million. So like I said, closer to 1% than 100%. So I tend to think we have a wild ride ahead of us.
Certainly, you're only just scratching the surface. So then looking at 2021, the year ahead, what are you most excited about? And when you look at the team growth, where do you think you'll be this time next year?
I think we will continue the exponential pace, right? So we started at essentially 0 18 months ago. We're now at about 15. We'll likely be at about 30, certainly in the next 12 months, maybe sooner. All of the other metrics should scale similarly, whether that's revenue or the fundraising piece or whatever it might be. So that's kind of the easy answer to the question. The hard answer to the question is more, what do we do with the money? What do we do with those people? And how do we get to that multiple hundreds of millions in revenue from just a couple million?
No, I think that bleeds in nicely to setting some aggressive goals, and for people listening who are interested in this space, maybe have previous ad tech marketing media experience, they will be intrigued by this new emerging space. Everybody knows the wave of transition towards subscriptions, and with that, there's going to be a massive demand to understand where the spend is going. Antenna are creating that answer. So it'd be good to understand with the growth ahead, what types of career opportunities there are going to be for people who are passionate about data, whether it's engineers, scientists. Can you give us some insight into the career opportunities and what you look for? I think you touched on it already with the core values, but for potential candidates in the future.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Maybe I can even start by kind of answering, like, from a company standpoint, how do we get there? And then a lot of the roles will become probably pretty apparent. I kind of think of it like maybe 3 different levers that we need to pull to get from where we are now to our North Star, which is kind of serving everyone in this consumer entertainment economy and helping them build sustainable and powerful consumer brands. The first is, we're only now just scratching the surface with the video streaming market, but of course there's audio, gaming, fitness, wellness, sports, and so on. Expanding to each of those verticals, but taking care that with that expansion, we don't lose quality. I think a lot of others get that wrong. I think they go too broad too quickly, and they're not excellent to anyone. We take the inverse approach, and we do think we can then kind of land and expand outwards. So expanding to all of those other verticals of consumer entertainment is expansion plan 1. But then, of course, there's the entire international or global market, right? So luckily, consumer dynamics and even language barriers create different consumer subscription services everywhere you go. However, the metrics and the numbers are universal. It's a good thing for us. And lastly, if you think about using third-party data to better make decisions, that's not just about benchmarking. It's also about attribution, about understanding and predicting and even preventing people from canceling their services before they do, and so on and so forth. It's all to say that there are a number of advanced analytics use cases that we frankly didn't think we would get to for years to come, but the market has actually been pulling us really hard. And so we think that's going to be more immediate than we had initially planned for. And if you kind of layer all of those things together on top of the initial product line, you really start to see a big, stable, lasting business. And the roles that come out of that are fairly obvious, right? There's going to be a never-ending, insatiable demand for really high-quality folks in data engineering, in data science, in analytics, in marketing, in sales, customer success, and all of the operational roles that come with that. And really people who feel passionately about our North Star, which is equipping these brands to become the incredible services that we dedicate so much of our lives, both our money and our attention to. And if you're that person and you have the right skills, I definitely want to talk to you personally.
You've covered so much in this interview, Rameez, but I think the final piece stands out so much because when we think of individuals who are looking for their next career move, the criteria often falls into 3 or 4 categories, namely the leadership. Are they bought in? Are they driven? Are they passionate? Are they supportive? Do they have a good culture? Then you look at the product. Is it a growing, emerging space where you're going to be working with interesting data and unique challenges where your skill set will be service? And in the industry, is it an area that is going to grow? And speaking to you and hearing about Antenna, clearly all of those boxes are ticked. So for people listening, looking for a great place to work, you guys seem like an obvious choice. So we appreciate you coming on today, Rameez, talking to us about your journey with Antenna. Incredibly exciting, and we look forward to seeing what you guys can accomplish in the years ahead.
Thanks, JP. And on that first point, I've been spending the better part of the last decade already thinking about this problem. I've got plenty of energy for another decade. So really, to your audience, to those people who feel passionate about that North Star we laid out, let's connect. We've got plenty of work still to do.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.